The stylist's scissors gleamed under the salon lights as I watched 6 years of carefully grown hair fall in dark cascades around the chair. My mother would have a stroke when she saw me. My sister Veronica would completely lose her mind. And that was exactly the point. Are you absolutely sure about this? The stylist asked for the third time, her hand hovering uncertainly above my head. Your hair is so beautiful. Once it's gone, I'm sure, I said, meeting her eyes in the mirror with a calm I hadn't felt in either of my lives. Cut it all off. She hesitated one more moment before the buzzing filled my ears, and I watched with savage satisfaction as the honey blonde waves that Veronica had spent $200 trying to replicate last week disappeared entirely. In my previous life, I'd walked into prom looking like her shadow, her slightly inferior twin in a cheaper dress and identical hair. She'd stolen my hairstyle, my date, and ultimately my entire future. But that was before I died at 28, broke and alone in a studio apartment, and woke up 16 again with all my memories intact. This time, things would be very, very different. The memory of my first prom night was still vivid despite the years, or perhaps because I'd lived them twice now. I'd spent months growing out my hair, conditioning it religiously, getting it highlighted to perfection. Veronica had noticed, of course. She always noticed when I had anything remotely nice. 3 days before prom, she'd shown up at dinner with her naturally dark hair, dyed the exact shade as mine, styled in the exact same layered cut I'd been cultivating for our junior year photos. What do you think? She'd gushed, spinning around the dining room while Mom and Dad applauded. I thought we could match for prom. Won't the pictures be adorable? Like real sisters. We were real sisters, half-sisters technically, but we'd grown up in the same house since I was 3. The difference was that Veronica was Dad's biological daughter from his first marriage, the child he'd planned and wanted. I was the product of my mother's brief second marriage to a man who'd left before I could walk. Mom had married Dad when I was a toddler and he'd raised me, but I'd always been the extra one. The charity case. The one they had to keep around but didn't really want. That's so sweet of you, Ronnie, Mom had cooed, running her fingers through Veronica's newly dyed hair while I sat there staring at my dinner plate. My unique hairstyle, the one thing that had been just mine, was now a matching set. We'd look like twins at prom, except she'd be the prettier twin in the expensive dress Dad had bought her, while I wore the one I'd cobbled together from clearance racks with my part-time job money. But the hair had only been the beginning of that night's disasters. Jake Moreno had asked me to prom 6 weeks in advance. He was a senior, captain of the debate team, destined for an Ivy League school and a brilliant future. He was also genuinely kind, funny, and he'd looked at me like I mattered. For the first time in my life, I'd felt seen, special, like maybe I wasn't just the unwanted extra daughter after all. Veronica had been dating Chad Richmond, the quarterback, for 8 months. They were the golden couple, her the beautiful cheerleader, him the football star. She'd had no interest in Jake whatsoever, right up until he asked me out. Then suddenly, Jake was all she could talk about. How smart he was, how mature. How debate team was so much more impressive than football when you really thought about it. Chad was sweet, she'd said, but maybe a little boring. Maybe she needed someone more intellectually stimulating. I should have seen it coming. In my first life, I'd been naive enough to think that Veronica's interest would pass, that Jake's genuine affection for me would be enough. I'd been wrong on both counts. Prom night, first life, I'd walk down our staircase in my secondhand dress, hair curled and pinned, feeling like maybe, just maybe, I could be pretty too. Jake had been waiting in the foyer, corsage in hand, and his face had lit up when he saw me, for exactly 10 seconds. Then Veronica had descended in a cloud of expensive perfume and designer tulle, her newly matched hair styled in an updo identical to the one I'd planned, only executed with professional precision instead of YouTube tutorials and hope. She'd literally posed on the stairs like a beauty pageant contestant while Mom and Dad took 1,000 pictures. Jake's attention had shifted just slightly. Just enough. You both look so beautiful, he'd said, trying to be polite, but his eyes had kept drifting to Veronica. Everyone's eyes always drifted to Veronica. The dance itself had been torture. Veronica had shown up with Chad, but She'd spent the whole night migrating closer to Jake and me, inserting herself into our conversations, laughing at his jokes just a little too loudly. Chad had looked confused. I'd felt my happiness crumbling in real time, like watching a sandcastle dissolve in the tide. By the time they announced Prom King and Queen, Veronica and Jake had been deep in discussion about college applications and scholarship essays. She'd been touching his arm. He'd been leaning in. I'd been standing 3 feet away, completely invisible. She won Prom Queen, naturally. Chad won King, but when she went up to accept her crown, she'd walked right past her boyfriend and kissed Jake instead. A brief, supposedly spontaneous peck that sent the crowd into chaos and photographers scrambling. "Sorry," she'd announced into the microphone, her voice carrying across the gym. "Sometimes you just can't help following your heart." The humiliation had been absolute. Chad had stormed out. Jake had stood there looking dazed and flattered. I'd run to the bathroom and cried through the rest of the dance. Mom had actually scolded me afterward for making a scene and being jealous of my sister's happiness. Dad had patted Veronica on the shoulder and said something about young love being unpredictable. Jake and Veronica had dated for the rest of senior year. They'd gone to the same Ivy League school together, Columbia, while I'd ended up at the local state college on partial financial aid because Dad had somehow forgotten to fill out my FAFSA on time. They'd gotten engaged junior year of college. I'd received a Facebook invitation to their engagement party, which I'd declined, citing work conflicts. The truth was that I'd been working 2 jobs trying to stay afloat while finishing my degree. Mom and Dad had paid for Veronica's entire college experience, including her Manhattan apartment and study abroad in Paris. I'd gotten a congratulations card for my high school graduation with $50 in it and a note saying they hoped I'd make something of myself. I had tried, God, I had tried. But every time I started to get ahead, something would go wrong. My car would break down, I'd get sick and miss work, my landlord would raise the rent. Meanwhile, Veronica's Instagram had been a constant stream of wedding planning, honeymoon in Bali, new brownstone in Brooklyn, promotions at her fashion PR firm. Jake had become a successful corporate lawyer. They'd had 2 beautiful children. Mom and Dad had retired early to help with childcare, spending more time with Veronica's family than they'd ever spent with me growing up. I'd been 28, working as a junior accountant at a firm that exploited me, living alone with a cat I could barely afford to feed when the chest pains had started. I'd ignored them. I didn't have good health insurance, and the urgent care copay alone would have wiped out my food budget for the week. By the time I'd collapsed in my apartment, it had been too late. Heart attack, the coroner had ruled later. Stress-induced, likely exacerbated by years of poor diet and untreated anxiety. I'd died on my bathroom floor, my cat meowing frantically, while Veronica had been posting pictures from Jake's partnership celebration party at some exclusive Manhattan restaurant. Then I'd woken up at 16, 1 week before junior prom, with a second chance and a burning determination to rewrite every single page of my story. The buzzing of the clippers stopped, jerking me back to the present. The stylist held up a mirror so I could see the back of my head. My long, beautiful blonde hair was gone. In its place was a neat buzz cut, maybe half an inch long all over, that revealed the actual shape of my skull and made my eyes look enormous. I looked nothing like the girl I'd been. Nothing like Veronica could ever copy. I looked free. "It's perfect," I said, grinning at my reflection. The stylist still looked doubtful, but she accepted my payment and generous tip with a professional smile. I walked out of the salon feeling lighter than I had in years, in both lives. My phone buzzed as I reached my car. A text from Veronica. "Can't wait for prom tomorrow. We're going to look so gorgeous with our matching hair. Jake is going to die." Jake, right, because in this timeline, she'd already started her campaign to steal him. She'd gotten her hair dyed 4 days ago instead of 3. I'd been tracking her movements carefully, using my knowledge of her patterns from the first life. She'd also started sitting with Jake at lunch, joining study groups he attended, positioning herself in his orbit. But she didn't know that I knew. She didn't know that I'd been quietly sabotaging her efforts for weeks, that I'd been planting seeds of doubt about her sincerity in Jake's mind through carefully orchestrated conversations. She didn't know that I'd already told Jake I was doing something dramatic with my hair, a surprise, and that he'd laughed and said he was sure I'd look beautiful no matter what. She didn't know that I'd spent the past 3 weeks getting to know him more deeply than I had in my entire first life, building a foundation of real friendship and genuine connection instead of teenage infatuation. Most importantly, she didn't know that I remembered everything. Every betrayal, every theft, every time she'd taken something from me and I'd just accepted it as my lot in life. The hair was just the opening move. I drove home slowly, preparing myself for the explosion. Mom's car was in the driveway. She'd taken the afternoon off work to help Veronica with her prom preparations, something she'd never done for me in either timeline. Dad wouldn't be home for another hour, which meant I'd have to weather Mom and Veronica first. Good. I wanted Veronica to see it first. The house was exactly as I remembered it. A large colonial in a nice suburb, well-maintained and perfectly decorated in the neutral tones Mom loved. There were family photos on the walls, mostly of Veronica at various stages of her perfect life. A few included me, usually at the edges, slightly out of focus or cut off. In my first life, I'd thought this was normal. In my second life, I saw it for what it was. Evidence that I'd never really been part of the family at all. I walked in through the front door, my keys jingling. Veronica's voice floated down from upstairs, probably on the phone with one of her friends. Mom was in the kitchen, judging by the smell of dinner cooking. Something elaborate, no doubt, because Veronica was home. "I'm back," I called out, setting my purse on the hall table. "How was the salon?" Mom called back. "Did they do those highlights you wanted?" "Something like that," I said, walking into the kitchen. Mom was at the stove, stirring something in a large pot. She turned around with a smile that froze on her face when she saw me. The wooden spoon clattered against the pot's edge. "What?" she said slowly. "Did you do to your hair?" "I cut it," I said pleasantly. "Do you like it?" Her face had gone white, then red. But prom is tomorrow. You and Veronica were supposed to match. She spent $200 getting her hair done to look like yours." "Then I guess she wasted $200, I said, opening the refrigerator to grab a water bottle. "I never asked her to copy me. That was her choice." "Her choice? This was supposed to be special. You two were supposed to take pictures together, match for prom, have a sister moment." Mom's voice was rising, taking on that edge of hysteria that I remembered so well. Everything was always about how things looked, about maintaining the image of the perfect blended family. Never mind that the family was only perfect for Veronica. I'm still her sister, just with different hair. I took a long drink of water, maintaining eye contact. "It's my hair. I can do what I want with it." "You did this on purpose. You did this to ruin her night." Mom's eyes were filling with angry tears. "You've always been jealous of her, but this is sabotage." Footsteps thundered on the stairs. "Mom, what's wrong? I heard—" Veronica burst into the kitchen and stopped dead, staring at me with her mouth open. "What the fuck did you do?" "Language," Mom said automatically, but her heart wasn't in it. "My hair, my choice," I said with a shrug. "You didn't seriously think I wanted a match with you, did you?" Veronica's face was cycling through emotions. Shock, fury, disbelief. Her hand went unconsciously to her own newly blonde hair, styled in soft waves that had cost a small fortune. But we were supposed to look like sisters. The photos, we do look like sisters. We just don't look like twins." I set down my water bottle. "Was there anything else? I have to pick up my dress from alterations." "Alterations?" Mom's voice was sharp. "What alterations? You said you were wearing the blue dress from Macy's clearance." "I changed my mind. Decided to invest a little more." In truth, I'd sold the pearl necklace Grandma Chen had left me. My biological grandmother, who'd died when I was 12. In my first life, I'd held on to it for sentimental reasons, eventually having to pawn it to pay rent in my mid-20s. In this life, I'd sold it early and invested the money carefully in stocks I knew would explode. My $2,200 had turned into $8,000 in 3 weeks. The dress I'd ordered was a custom piece from a designer Veronica had been eyeing, emerald green silk that made my skin glow and my eyes pop, cut to perfection for my body. It cost $3,500 and was worth every penny for the look on her face when she saw it. "Invest?" Veronica's laugh was shrill. With what money? Your Pizza Hut paychecks? I'd quit Pizza Hut 2 weeks ago, right after my stock portfolio had matured. I've been saving, I said simply, and making some smart investments. Investments? Veronica scoffed. God, you're so pretentious. Just admit you did this to ruin my prom. Your prom? I raised an eyebrow. Last time I checked, we're both going to the same prom. It's not yours any more than it's mine. You know what I mean. This is my night. I'm going to be prom queen. Chad and I are going to win the cutest couple vote, and you are supposed to be my supporting cast. Now you look like, like what? I asked coolly. Say it. She floundered, her face red. Like a boy, you look ridiculous. Everyone's going to laugh at you. Better they laugh at me than mistake me for you, I said. The words came out sharper than I'd intended, and I saw them land like a slap. Good. Now, if you'll excuse me. I walked past both of them, heading for the stairs. Behind me, Veronica burst into tears, real ones from the sound of it, and Mom immediately started comforting her. Shh, baby, it's okay. You'll still be the most beautiful girl there. Everyone will be looking at you anyway. You know how people are. They'll probably feel sorry for her. Their voices faded as I climbed to my room and shut the door. My hands were shaking slightly from the adrenaline, but I felt good, strong. In my first life, I would have cried myself to sleep after a confrontation like that. In this life, I'd stood my ground. My phone buzzed. Jake. Hey, still on for picking you up at 6 tomorrow? Can't wait to see this dramatic new look. I smiled and typed back, definitely, fair warning, it's very dramatic. Hope you're ready. I'm sure you look amazing. See you tomorrow. That was the thing about Jake that I'd forgotten in the bitterness of my first life. He really was a good guy. Veronica had stolen him partly through manipulation, but partly because I'd been so insecure and passive that I'd basically handed him over. This time, I'd been different from the start. Confident, funny, interesting. I'd actually talked to him about things that mattered instead of just giggling and hoping he'd like me. We'd bonded over books, over our shared ambition to escape our small town, over the pressure of living up to everyone's expectations. I'd also subtly highlighted Veronica's superficiality every chance I got. Not through direct criticism, that would have backfired, but through comparison. When she'd started joining our lunch table and talking about shopping and celebrity gossip, I'd steered conversations toward politics and philosophy. When she'd tried to impress him with her designer clothes, I'd engaged him in discussions about ethical consumption and fast fashion's environmental impact. I'd positioned myself as the deep one, the thinker, the one worth knowing. It was manipulative, maybe, but she'd manipulated him away from me in my first life without a second thought. Turnabout was fair play. My door opened without a knock. Veronica stood there, her eyes red and swollen, her perfect face blotchy with tears. How could you? She whispered. How could I what? Get a haircut? You know this is about more than a haircut. She stepped into my room, shutting the door behind her. I spent so much money, I did. This for us, so we could have a special sister moment, and you threw it in my face. You didn't do it for us, I said, sitting on my bed and meeting her eyes steadily. You did it because you don't like it when I have anything that's my own. You saw that I'd grown my hair out, that it looked good, that people were complimenting me, and you couldn't stand it. So you copied me, turned my unique thing into our matching thing, except you do it better because you always do everything better, right? Her mouth opened, closed. That's not, I just thought. Let me guess, you thought it would be cute, sweet, sisterly. I stood up, walking over to my mirror. My reflection still startled me. The buzz cut made me look fierce, almost punk rock. I loved it. But you never asked me. You just did it and assumed I'd be fine with it. Just like you do with everything else. Like what? Her voice was defensive now, tears drying up. What else have I done? Oh, where to start? In this timeline, she hadn't done much yet. We were only juniors, and the really big betrayals wouldn't come for years. But I remembered all of it. Nothing, I said. Yet. But that's going to change, isn't it? Because tomorrow night you're planning to make a move on Jake. Her face went pale, then red. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. I've watched you circling him for the past 2 weeks, joining his study groups, sitting at our lunch table, laughing at all his jokes. You've been dating Chad for 8 months, but suddenly Jake is so much more interesting, isn't he? I turned to face her fully. Let me save you some time. It's not going to work. You're paranoid, she said, but her voice wavered. Jake is nice. I'm allowed to be friends with him. You're allowed to be friends with whoever you want. But if you try to steal my date at prom, if you pull some dramatic stunt to humiliate me and make yourself look like the prize, I promise you it will backfire so spectacularly that you'll regret ever looking at him. Veronica stared at me like I'd grown a second head. Who are you? You sounded sane. The old you would never. The old me is gone, I interrupted. I got a haircut, remember? Fresh start, new attitude, and I'm done being the sister who just accepts whatever scraps you leave me. She stood there for a long moment, clearly trying to process this new version of me. Finally, she shook her head. You're going to regret this. When you show up tomorrow with that awful hair and everyone laughs at you, don't come crying to me. Don't worry, I said. I won't. She left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. I sat back down on my bed, my heart pounding. That had felt good. Really good. But it was only the beginning. Dad came home an hour later, and the explosion happened all over again. He took one look at my hair, and his face settled into that expression of disappointed resignation that I knew so well. What were you thinking? Was all he said. And somehow that was worse than Mom's hysterics or Veronica's tears. He didn't even care enough to be angry, just disappointed. Always disappointed. I was thinking it's my hair, I said. He sighed. You used to be such an easy child. I don't know what's gotten into you lately. Easy. Code for quiet, compliant, invisible. I'd spent 16 years being easy, and where had it gotten me? A first life of misery and an early death. Maybe I'm growing up, I said. Growing up means being considerate of others. Your sister is very upset. Veronica will survive, I said. She usually does. He looked at me strangely, like he was seeing someone he didn't quite recognize. Good. Let him look. Let them all look. Tomorrow night, they'd see just how much I'd changed. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run, something I'd started doing after my rebirth, knowing I needed to take better care of my body this time around. The early morning air was crisp and clean, and I felt powerful pushing myself up the hills around our neighborhood. My shorter hair made everything easier. No ponytail bouncing, no strands sticking to my sweaty face. Just freedom. When I got back, Mom and Veronica were already up, deep in prom preparations. I could hear them in Veronica's room, chattering about makeup and jewelry. I showered, taking my time, then dressed in comfortable clothes and headed to the alteration shop to pick up my dress. Mrs. Kim, the seamstress, had outdone herself. The emerald green silk fit like it had been painted on, hugging every curve while still being elegant and age-appropriate. The neckline was a deep V that was sexy without being trashy, and the back dipped low, showing off my shoulders and the long line of my spine. The skirt flowed to the floor in a way that made me feel like a movie star. You look beautiful, Mrs. Kim said, smiling at my reflection. Like a princess, very classy. Thank you, I said, meaning it. It's perfect. I picked up the matching shoes and a small clutch, then stopped at the makeup counter at Nordstrom, where I'd booked an appointment with one of their beauty advisors. I'd learned about makeup in my first life through years of trial and error and YouTube videos. This time, I was starting with professional help. The makeup artist, Zara, took one look at my face and broke into a grin. The buzz cut! I love it! So bold! You have the bone structure to pull it off. Look at those cheekbones! She spent an hour transforming my face, emphasizing my eyes with dramatic wings and making my lips look full and perfect. The final look was stunning. Sophisticated, fierce, and entirely unlike the soft, pretty look Veronica always went for. When I left Nordstrom, I felt like a different person. Maybe because I was. The house was in full chaos when I returned. Mom was running around with curling irons and bobby pins, making sure Veronica looked absolutely perfect. Dad was setting up his camera equipment. He fancied himself an amateur photographer and always went overboard for Veronica's events. Chad had arrived early with Veronica's corsage, looking uncomfortable in a rental tux that was slightly too small. No one noticed me slip upstairs with my garment bag and makeup kit. I took my time getting ready, enjoying the process of transformation. The dress went on like a dream. The makeup I touched up carefully, adding a bit more highlight to my cheekbones, making sure everything was perfect. I'd bought simple diamond studs, real ones thanks to my stock windfall, that caught the light beautifully against my short hair. When I finally looked at myself in the full-length mirror, I actually gasped. The girl looking back at me was stunning. Elegant, powerful. The buzz cut, which could have been harsh, instead made me look like a model, like someone who was so confident in her beauty that she didn't need hair to prove it. The green dress made my skin glow. I looked like I belonged on a red carpet, not at a suburban high school prom. I heard the doorbell ring downstairs. Jake, right on time. My stomach fluttered with nervous excitement. This was it, the moment where I reclaimed my narrative. I grabbed my clutch and took a deep breath. Then I walked out of my room and down the stairs. The scene in the foyer was like a frozen tableau. Jake stood by the door in a perfectly fitted black tux, holding a corsage of white roses. Mom, Ann, and Dad were positioned with their cameras. Chad and Veronica stood together, Veronica in a pale pink dress that was beautiful, but, I noted with satisfaction, not nearly as striking as mine. Her blonde hair was curled and pinned up identically to how I'd worn mine in my first life. They all turned to look at me as I descended the stairs. Jake's face transformed. His eyes went wide and his mouth literally fell open. "Wow," he breathed. "You look incredible." Mom made a strangled noise. Dad lowered his camera. Veronica's face went through a journey of emotions, landing on something between fury and disbelief. "Surprise," I said lightly, reaching the bottom of the stairs. "Told you it was dramatic." "You look like a supermodel," Jake said, still staring. "That dress, your hair, everything. You look amazing." I saw Veronica's hand tighten on Chad's arm. Chad, to his credit, was also staring at me with an expression of stunned appreciation that he quickly tried to hide. Yeah, you look nice," he mumbled. "Nice?" Jake turned to him. "Dude, nice. She looks like she belongs at the Met Gala." He walked over to me, holding out the corsage. "These suddenly feel really inadequate, but—" "They're perfect," I said, letting him slide the corsage onto my wrist. His hands were shaking slightly. He smelled like expensive cologne and nervous excitement. "Pictures," Dad said, but his voice lacked enthusiasm. Still, he was a man who followed through on his plans. "Let's get some shots of both couples. Together first, then individual ones." The next 20 minutes were an exercise in subtle torture for Veronica. In every photo, standing next to me in my dramatic dress and bold hair, she looked washed out and conventional. Pretty, but forgettable. I'd spent my first life being the forgettable one. It was her turn. Mom kept trying to position us so that Veronica was more prominent, but Jake unconsciously kept moving closer to me, his hand on my waist, his attention focused entirely on me. I saw Veronica's smile getting more and more forced. Chad looked confused by the whole dynamic. "Okay, I think we have enough," Mom finally said, her voice tight. "You kids have fun." Jake and I headed to his car, his mom's old Volvo, reliable and practical. He opened my door for me, and I slid into the passenger seat, feeling like I was floating. As we pulled away from the house, I glanced back to see Veronica standing in the doorway, watching us leave, her expression unreadable. "So," Jake said as we drove, "I have to ask, why the buzz cut? Not that you don't look amazing, you do, but it's such a change." "I wanted to try something different," I said. And I guess I was tired of trying to be what everyone expected. Sometimes you have to do something radical to remind yourself that you're in control of your own life. He glanced at me, smiling. "That's actually really deep and brave. I don't think I could pull off a look like that, but you You wear it like you were born to it. Thanks, I said, feeling genuine warmth spread through my chest. This was what I'd missed in my first life. This easy connection, this sense that someone actually saw me. I'd been too insecure to accept it then, too ready to believe Veronica's version of events where I was the inferior sister. Not this time. Prom was being held at a fancy hotel downtown, the ballroom decorated in silver and blue. As Jake and I walked in, I felt heads turning. People stared, whispered, pointed. I heard fragments of conversation. Is that really her? So brave. I could never, but she looks incredible. Like a model. We found our table, which we were sharing with a few of Jake's debate team friends and their dates. Everyone complimented my look, and I felt myself relaxing into the evening. Jake was attentive and funny, spinning me around the dance floor even though neither of us were great dancers, making me laugh until my sides hurt. Veronica and Chad were at a table across the room with the popular crowd. I saw her watching us, her expression stormy. Every time Jake made me laugh, every time we leaned close to hear each other over the music, her face darkened a little more. About an hour into the dance, she made her move. The DJ had just started playing a slow song, and Jake had gone to get us drinks. Veronica appeared at my side, her smile brittle. "Having fun?" she asked. "I am, actually. You?" "Chad's being boring," she said. "He's mad that I wanted to coordinate with you instead of him. Boys are so petty, right?" "Right," I said neutrally. "Jake seems really into you," she continued, her voice casual but her eyes sharp. "That's nice. He's a good guy." "He is. Very smart, too. We've been having the most interesting conversations in study group. He's helping me with my college essay. Did he tell you? We're both applying early to Columbia." There it was, the opening salvo. She was establishing her connection to him, reminding me that she had access to him outside of this one date, suggesting a future where they'd be at the same school. "That's nice of him," I said. "Though I should probably mention that Jake already told me about your essay. The one about overcoming adversity by getting cut from the JV cheer squad as a freshman?" Her smile froze. "He told you about my essay?" "He tells me about a lot of things. We talk a lot." I met her eyes steadily. See, the thing about Jake is that he's not actually all that impressed by superficial stuff. He likes depth, authenticity, people who've actually overcome real challenges, not manufactured ones. "My challenges are real," she hissed, dropping the friendly pretense. "Sure they are. Must be so hard being Dad's favorite, having everything handed to you, never having to worry about money or approval or whether people actually love you for you." I kept my voice light, almost sympathetic. "The real adversity is figuring out who you are when you've never had to fight for anything, right?" She looked like I'd slapped her. "You don't know what my life is like." "I know exactly what your life is like. I've watched it up close for 13 years. Jake was heading back with our drinks. I could see him weaving through the crowd. "Here's some sisterly advice. Chad's a good guy. He actually cares about you. Maybe try appreciating what you have instead of wanting what someone else has." "You think you've won something?" Veronica said, her voice low and furious. "You think that dress and that hair make you special, but everyone's laughing at you. You look ridiculous, and Jake's only with you because he feels sorry for you." "Is that what you need to believe?" I asked. "Because from where I'm standing, Jake hasn't looked at another girl all night, including you." Jake arrived, handing me a cup of punch and smiling. "Your sister keeping you company?" "Just catching up," Veronica said, her smile snapping back into place. "I'll let you two get back to your date. Save me a dance later, Jake?" "Sure," Jake said politely, but his attention was already back on me. Veronica walked away, her shoulders tight with anger. I sipped my punch and felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Round one to me. The evening progressed beautifully. Jake and I danced, talked, laughed. His friends clearly liked me, and I felt myself becoming part of his social circle in a way I never had in my first life. I wasn't just Jake's date. I was interesting in my own right. Around 9 o'clock, the DJ announced it was time to vote for prom king and queen. In my first life, I'd known Veronica would win. She was popular, pretty, and awesome, and had campaigned for it since freshman year. Chad had won king, as expected. But then Veronica had kissed Jake during her acceptance speech, and my humiliation had been complete. This time, I'd taken precautions. Nothing dramatic, just a few conversations with the right people, planting seeds of doubt about Veronica's character. A comment here about how she'd cheated on a test sophomore year. True, I'd witnessed it. A mention there about how she'd spread rumors about a girl who'd threatened her spot on the cheer squad. Also true. Nothing I said was a lie. I'd just made sure people remembered who Veronica really was behind the pretty face and charming smile. The votes were tallied quickly. The DJ called for attention. All right, everyone, the moment you've been waiting for. This year's prom king is Chad Richmond. Applause erupted. Chad looked pleased but not surprised, jogging up to accept his crown. He scanned the crowd, clearly expecting Veronica to join him. And this year's prom queen is Emma Martinez. The crowd went wild. Emma, a sweet girl who volunteered at the animal shelter and tutored kids for free, looked shocked. She was pretty in an understated way, genuinely kind, and actually deserved the honor. She certainly deserved it more than Veronica. I glanced across the room. Veronica had gone completely still, her face frozen in an expression of shock. She'd been so sure she'd win. She'd planned her speech, her photo poses, her triumphant moment, and it had just evaporated. Chad and Emma were crowned and shared the traditional king and queen dance, both looking a bit awkward but happy. Veronica stayed at her table, her smile gone, replaced by a look of devastation. Mom and Dad had come to the dance as chaperones. They'd wanted to see Veronica crowned, and I saw Mom making her way over to comfort her. Dad stood at the edge of the dance floor, looking uncomfortable. Emma deserved it, Jake said, watching the royal dance. She's actually a really good person, unlike some people who just know how to play popular. Agreed, I said. Want to dance? He grinned. Always. We joined the crowd on the dance floor, and I let myself just enjoy the moment. This was what prom was supposed to be. Fun, lighthearted, a celebration. Not the nightmare of humiliation my first prom had been. Around 10 o'clock, we took a break to get some air. The hotel had a beautiful garden area, lit with string lights and filled with other couples taking photos and stealing kisses. Jake and I found a quiet bench near a fountain. I'm really glad I asked you to prom, Jake said, taking my hand. This has been one of the best nights of my life. Mine too, I said, and meant it. Can I tell you something? He looked suddenly nervous. I've liked you for a long time, since freshman year, actually, but you always seemed so, unreachable. Like you were in your own world. It wasn't until this year that you seemed to really see me back. Because in my first life, I'd been too busy being invisible, too focused on surviving my family to notice anything else. I see you now, I said. He leaned in and kissed me, soft and sweet, and it was perfect. Nothing like the awkward first kiss we'd had in my previous life, rushed and clumsy. This was tender and genuine, and when we pulled apart, we were both smiling. There you are! Veronica's voice cut through the moment like a knife. She stood a few feet away, Chad trailing behind her, looking miserable. I've been looking everywhere for you guys. What's up? Jake asked, his hand still holding mine. I just wanted to say, she looked at me, her eyes glittering with something dangerous, that I'm sorry. About earlier, about everything. You were right, I should appreciate what I have. She turned to Chad, who looked surprised. Baby, I'm sorry I've been so weird lately. You're what matters. She pulled him in and kissed him, a dramatic show clearly intended to demonstrate her contentment. When she pulled back, she was smiling at me, but her eyes promised war. Well, that's great, I said. I'm happy for you guys. And I'm happy for you, she said sweetly. Really, you and Jake make a cute couple. Unexpected, but cute. There was a barb in there somewhere, but I couldn't quite grasp it. Jake seemed oblivious, just nodding politely. Thanks. We should probably get back inside. They're about to announce the after-party location. As we walked back, Veronica fell into step beside me while Jake and Chad walked ahead. "You think you're so clever," she whispered, her voice vicious. "You think you've beaten me. But this isn't over. Not even close." "I know," I whispered back. "I'm counting on it." The rest of prom passed without incident. We stayed until the bitter end, dancing and laughing and taking 1,000 pictures. Jake drove me home around midnight, walking me to the door like a gentleman. "I had an amazing time," he said, kissing me goodnight on the porch. "Can I take you to breakfast tomorrow? I want to keep this going." "I'd love that," I said. I watched him drive away, then let myself into the quiet house. Mom, Anam, and Dad were already asleep, or pretending to be. Veronica's door was closed, no light showing underneath. I went to my room, carefully hung up my dress, and stood in front of the mirror in my underwear, looking at my reflection. The girl looking back at me was stronger than she'd been yesterday, and infinitely stronger than she'd been in her first life. But this was just the beginning. Prom had been a battle, not the war. The real challenges were still ahead: college applications, establishing my independence, building a life that was truly mine, and dealing with Veronica's inevitable revenge plots. But I was ready. I had years of future, knowledge, a growing bank account, and most importantly, I had finally learned to fight for myself. I climbed into bed and fell asleep with a smile on my face, dreaming of all the ways my second life would be different from my first. The next few weeks passed in a blur of end-of-year activities and heightened tension at home. Veronica barely spoke to me, communicating only through pointed silences and dramatic sighs. Mom tried to play peacemaker, but her loyalties were clear. Veronica was the victim in her narrative, and I was the difficult daughter who'd ruined what should have been a perfect night. Dad simply avoided both of us, retreating to his office whenever female emotions threatened to involve him. Jake and I grew closer, spending every available moment together. We studied for finals at the library, went to the movies, took long drives talking about our dreams and fears. I was careful to be genuine with him. After all, I'd learned that authenticity was what he valued most. But I was also strategic, planting doubts about Veronica whenever her name came up. "She's been texting me a lot," he mentioned one afternoon as we sat in his car after school. "Study group stuff mostly, but I don't know, it feels like more than that sometimes." "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what he meant. "She's just very intense. Asks a lot of personal questions. Wants to know about my college plans, my family, my future. It's fine, I guess, but it feels like she's interviewing me for something." He looked uncomfortable. "And she keeps finding reasons to touch me. My arm, my shoulder." Chad was there yesterday, and he looked really annoyed. "She's probably just being friendly," I said carefully. "Veronica's very physical with everyone, but if it makes you uncomfortable, you should tell her." "It doesn't make me uncomfortable exactly, it's just weird, especially since she's dating Chad." He paused. "Do you think she's into me?" Here was my opening. I could have said yes, could have exposed her entire plot, but that would have made me look paranoid and jealous. Instead, I went for something more subtle. "I think Veronica likes attention. She's been the center of everything her whole life, and lately people have been paying more attention to other things, to us, to Emma winning prom queen, whatever. She's probably just reasserting her place in the social hierarchy. You're popular and smart, so she wants to be close to you to maintain her status." Jake frowned. That's kind of cynical." "Is it, or is it just realistic?" I shrugged. "Look, Veronica's my sister, and I love her, but I also know her. She's not used to not being the most special person in any room. It makes her act out sometimes." "Huh," he processed this. "That actually explains a lot." And just like that, I'd reframed Veronica's pursuit as desperate status-seeking rather than genuine interest. If she escalated, he'd see it through that lens. I'd planted the seed. But Veronica wasn't giving up easily. At school, she ramped up her campaign. She joined more of Jake's study groups, started eating lunch at our table more regularly, found excuses to partner with him on group projects. She was careful to be charming and sweet, playing the role of friendly sister who just wanted everyone to get along. The problem was that Jake was too polite to shut her down, and I couldn't complain without looking insecure. So I had to find another way. That's when I remembered Daniel Park. Daniel was a junior like us, quiet and smart, captain of the chess club, and a computer genius. He'd had a crush on Veronica since freshman year, obvious to everyone except Veronica herself, who'd never noticed anyone who wasn't either popular or useful to her. In my first life, Daniel had eventually given up and moved on, ending up at MIT and later founding a successful tech startup. But here, now, he was still nursing his hopeless infatuation. I found him in the library one afternoon, hunched over his laptop, working on code for the robotics club. "Hey, Daniel," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. He looked up, surprised. We'd never really talked beyond basic pleasantries. "Oh, hey, what's up?" "I wanted to ask you something about my sister." His face immediately went red. "What about her?" "I know you like her," I said gently, Sadaz. "I've seen how you look at her, and I think you should ask her out." He blinked. "I demanda. Are you kidding? She's dating Chad Richmond, and even if she wasn't, she'd never go for someone like me." "Chad's a placeholder," I said. "Veronica dates him because he's safe and expected. But I know my sister, she's bored. She's looking for something more interesting. Someone who can actually challenge her intellectually." This was all lies, of course. Veronica didn't want intellectual challenge. She wanted social status and validation. But Daniel didn't know that? "You really think so?" Hope flickered in his eyes. "I do. And between you and me, things with Chad aren't great right now. I think she's looking for a reason to break up with him. If you make a move, something bold and romantic, you might be surprised by her response." "I don't know," he said doubtfully. "She's pretty out of my league." "Leagues are a social construct," I said firmly. "You're smart, kind, and you're going places. Any girl would be lucky to date you, including Veronica." We talked for another 20 minutes. I coached him on how to approach her, suggested he write her a letter expressing his feelings, something old-fashioned and sincere. I knew Veronica would be flattered by the attention, even if she wasn't interested. And I also knew that if she mentioned it to anyone, it would get back to Chad. Chad, who was already insecure about Veronica's interest in Jake, would lose his mind if he thought she was collecting even more male attention. The goal wasn't to set Daniel up for heartbreak, though that was an unfortunate side effect. The goal was to create chaos in Veronica's carefully controlled world. If she was busy dealing with Daniel's confession and Chad's jealousy, she'd have less energy to focus on stealing Jake. Daniel ended up writing the letter that weekend and delivering it to Veronica's locker on Monday morning. I watched from down the hall as she found it, read it, and her face went through a complicated series of expressions: confusion, flattery, annoyance, calculation. She looked around as if checking to see if anyone was watching, then quickly stuffed the letter in her bag. By lunch, the rumor mill was churning. Someone had seen Daniel giving her the letter. People were speculating. Was Veronica cheating on Chad? Was she going to dump him for Daniel? Chad heard the rumors and confronted her in the cafeteria. "Who the hell is Daniel Park?" he demanded, his voice carrying across the lunchroom. "He's no one," Veronica said, looking flustered. "Just some nerd who has a crush on me." "I can't control who likes me, Chad." "You can control whether you encourage it," he shot back. "People are saying you've been flirting with him and Jake Moreno." "What the hell, Ronnie?" "I haven't been flirting with anyone." "God, can't I have friends who are guys without everyone assuming I'm cheating?" "Friends don't write you love letters." Their fight escalated, eventually resulting in Veronica storming out of the cafeteria in tears and Chad punching a locker hard enough to earn himself a suspension. It was beautiful chaos, and I'd orchestrated the whole thing with nothing but a few well-placed words to Daniel. Jake watched the drama unfold with a frown. "Your sister okay?" he asked me. "She'll be fine," I said. "This is kind of typical for her. Drama follows her around." "I guess so." He didn't look entirely convinced, but he also didn't seem inclined to get involved. Good. The rest of junior year passed relatively smoothly after that. Veronica and Chad patched things up, they always did, but she was noticeably cooler toward Jake, probably afraid of stirring up more jealousy. I managed to position myself as Jake's girlfriend in truth, not just on paper. We spent the summer together, both working part-time jobs and dreaming about college applications. I'd been careful with my stock market windfall, investing wisely and building my portfolio. By the time senior year started, I had nearly $50,000, more than enough to pay for college without relying on my parents at all. I'd also been researching scholarships and grants, preparing to apply to every opportunity available. Jake and I both applied early to Columbia, just like he'd done with Veronica in my first life. But this time, I was the one helping him with his essays, the one strategizing with him about extracurriculars and interview prep. When our acceptance letters came in December of senior year, we celebrated together, already planning our future in New York. Veronica, meanwhile, had her heart set on Columbia too, just like in my first timeline. But without Jake's help, her application was weaker. She'd written her college essay about the adversity of being beautiful and popular, about how people underestimated her intelligence. The admissions officers apparently didn't find it as compelling as she'd hoped. Her rejection letter came in March. She opened it at dinner, went pale, and ran upstairs crying. Mom and Dad tried to comfort her, talking about how she could attend the local state school and transfer after a year, how community college wasn't a bad option, how there were plenty of opportunities close to home. I stayed quiet through the whole thing, eating my dinner calmly. I'd gotten into Columbia. I had the money to pay for it. I had a boyfriend who loved me. I was escaping this house and this family and starting a real life. Veronica looked at me across the table, her eyes red and accusing. "You did this," she said. "Somehow you did this." "I did what? Got into college? That's typically what happens when you work hard and write good essays." I kept my voice even. "You sabotaged me. I know you did. You've been sabotaging me all year. The prom queen vote, Chad being jealous, Jake choosing you over me, all of it." "Veronica," Mom said warningly, "don't blame your sister for your disappointment." "She's right, though," I said, setting down my fork. Everyone looked at me. "I did sabotage you. At least I stopped letting you sabotage me. I stopped being your convenient backup plan, your supporting character, your emotional punching bag. I started fighting for what I wanted instead of just accepting whatever scraps you left me. If that feels like sabotage to you, that says more about what you've been doing to me than what I've done to you." The silence that followed was deafening. "How dare you?" Mom finally said, her voice shaking. "After everything we've done for you? You mean after you did the legal minimum required to care for your husband's stepdaughter?" I interrupted. "After you paid more attention to Veronica's hangnail than my actual accomplishments? After you spent thousands on her prom dress and gave me $50 for mine? Please, Mom, list everything you've done for me. I'd love to hear it." "You've always been so ungrateful," she said. "We took you in, raised you as our own. You took in a toddler who had no other options and did the bare minimum to keep CPS from asking questions," I said. "Let's not pretend this was some grand act of charity. And I'm grateful for the roof over my head and the food on my plate, but that's where my gratitude ends." Dad finally spoke up. "That's enough. This is not appropriate dinner conversation." "You're right," I agreed, standing up. "I think I'm done with dinner anyway. And just so everyone knows, I'll be moving to New York in August for Columbia. I have money saved, scholarships lined up, and a life planned that doesn't include any of you unless you want to be part of it. The choice is yours." I left the table and went to my room, my heart pounding but my head clear. Behind me, I heard Veronica burst into fresh tears and Mom's voice raised in anger. But I'd said what needed to be said. The rest of senior year was tense at home but liberating everywhere else. Jake and I made plans for Columbia, looking at dorm options and course catalogs. My grades stayed perfect. I won scholarships and awards. I existed as much outside my family as possible. Veronica attended community college locally, as predicted. She tried to maintain her popular girl status, but without the structure of high school, it faded fast. Chad broke up with her over the summer before college, having gotten accepted to a school in California. She spiraled into a depression that mom and dad both blamed on me somehow. I didn't care. I was free. Moving to New York that August was like being reborn for a third time. Columbia was everything I'd hoped for: challenging, exciting, full of opportunities. Jake and I stayed together through freshman year, though we eventually realized we were better as friends than romantic partners. We broke up amicably and remained close, both of us dating other people but always maintaining our bond. I thrived in ways I'd never imagined in my first life. I double-oared in business and computer science, joined clubs, made genuine friends. Without the weight of my family holding me down, I discovered that I was actually quite extraordinary. My stock market hobby turned into a passion, and by sophomore year, I was running a small investment consulting service for other students. Back home, Veronica floundered. She transferred to a state school after a year of community college but dropped out junior year. She moved back in with mom and dad, working retail and posting increasingly bitter social media updates about how unfair life was. Mom and dad tried to get me to help her, to use my connections, my money, my success to pull her up. I refused. She had every advantage, I told them during one tense phone call. Money, attention, love, support. If she squandered all that, that's on her, not me. She's your sister, Mom said. And you're my mother, I replied. But that didn't stop you from treating me like an obligation instead of a daughter. I learned from you that family is about more than blood. It's about how you treat people. And you taught me that some people don't deserve your loyalty. They stopped calling after that. I graduated Columbia with honors and multiple job offers from top firms. I chose a position at a venture capital firm in Manhattan, helping to fund tech startups. My salary was 6 figures right out of college. I bought a beautiful apartment in Brooklyn, adopted 2 cats, and built a life that was entirely, completely mine. Jake visited sometimes. He'd gone into environmental law and was doing amazing work. We'd laugh about high school, about how dramatic it had all seemed. He'd eventually heard rumors about Veronica trying to pursue him junior year and had been horrified. She's your sister, he'd said. That would have been so weird. Tell me about it, I'd replied, thinking about my first life where she'd succeeded, where she'd stolen him, married him, built a life with him while I'd struggled and died alone. On my 28th birthday, the age I'd died in my first life, I threw myself a party. A big one in my apartment with all my friends and colleagues and chosen family. Jake came, bringing his fiancée. Other Columbia friends showed up with expensive wine and elaborate gifts. My work colleagues came, treating me like the success I was. It was everything my first life hadn't been. I was successful, surrounded by people who valued me, healthy and happy and wealthy. I'd built an empire out of the ashes of my first life, and it was glorious. The only people not invited were Veronica, Mom, and Dad. They'd tried to reach out over the years, especially once they realized how successful I'd become. Veronica had sent multiple messages asking for money, for connections, for help. Mom had tried the guilt angle. Family forgives, family helps each other. Don't be cruel. Dad had barely tried at all. Just a few awkward emails suggesting we let bygones be bygones. I'd ignored them all. They'd had their chance to be my family. They'd chosen to make me feel worthless instead. Now I was proving my worth without them, and they'd have to live with that choice. The party wound down around midnight. I stood on my balcony looking out at the Manhattan skyline and thought about the girl I'd been. Both versions of her, the one who'd died at 28, broken and alone, and the one who'd gotten a second chance and seized it with both hands. You did good, I told my reflection in the glass door. You survived. You won. And I had, against all odds, against all expectations, against the family who'd tried to keep me small, I had won, not just survived, but thrived, built a life so bright it would have blinded my first life self. The real revenge wasn't that Veronica had lost, it was that I'd won so completely she couldn't even touch me anymore. Her jealousy, her manipulation, her need to steal everything I had, none of it mattered because I'd gotten so far beyond her reach that we weren't even playing the same game anymore. I went back inside to my party, to my people, to my life. The past was behind me, the future was mine, and I was never, ever looking back.